is Ruth Ratliff, voice and vibrational sound professional, and I am very happy to be interviewing my friend Lee Grabarczyk, the Mandala Medium. And Lee channels beautiful sacred geometrical mandalas that help people, how shall we say, reach their own potential. So today, what I wanted to focus on was, as I said earlier, sacred geometry. And because you're kind of, this is what you do, Lee. And I wanted to get your take on this. A while ago, I just had this idea because there's so many videos out about sacred geometry.
Yes.
And no matter how many times I watch those videos, I read descriptions and explanations of sacred geometry, it's almost like it doesn't, you know, it's still, what really is this? And,
yes.
And you know, I remember in high school I had geometry, you know, as a course. It was my favorite math. I hated the other maths, but geometry I got. And there's probably a reason for that.
Sure.
But, you know, basically, if you can speak into really a little bit about what exactly is sacred geometry and why is it sacred?
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So we learn through symbols. And the most basic symbols that exist throughout history, throughout our language, are representational of stellar bodies, things in nature, etc. So that would be, and these are basically, can be seen within the Platonic solids. So the Platonic solids are one of the kind of the currently, there's a lot of interest in this. This is through the Metatron's cube. So the Platonic solids are basically, the most simple is a pyramidal form. So we go from a tetrahedron to a cube to an octahedron, dodecahedron, etc. So these things collectively represent this mandala, really, which is this Metatron cube. So this Metatron cube is kind of a symbol of all of the different sort of shapes that exist in nature. And basically it just puts them all together into one idea to show that everything in nature goes together. So the kind of the sacred part of this, and where we get into the sacred aspects of it, is that, and what can actually begin many different ways, but one of the ways I think might be interesting is even within our chakras. So our chakras carry with them basic geometric forms, and you can see this throughout the history of their explanation. We constantly see these forms. And geometry, again, is a language. It's a language that exists in an abstraction because the universal nature of it is such that it crosses all different kinds of cultures, different kinds of languages, different levels of awareness. So when we see like a circle, we know that that circle has a certain meaning. When we see a triangle or a pyramid, we know it has certain meaning. And those ideas, even in architecture, etc., with the pyramid, for example, they're very powerful for us because unconsciously we know that they represent some kind of organized energy.
So what I had a question on too was you were referring earlier to the symbols for the chakras, and
yes.
I wanted to get your clarification because it seems to me, yeah, that each chakra has its own sacred geometrical symbol. And can you speak into that a little bit more, please?
Yes. So we have these basic shapes that each of these basic shapes has its own language. It has its own meaning. Okay. And then the way that these basic shapes are organized represents a different kind of energy. And people much smarter than me, as in India and other cultures too, have created symbolic representations of each of these chakras. All of the different shapes draw upon, again, these basic principles. You know, the sun has a shape, the moon has a shape, stars have a shape. Lotus plants have a shape. Different animals that represent an idea have a shape. And then we take these and we use them almost like sentences to organize them together to create this symbolic way of depicting these complicated ideas. what's the phrase? A picture's worth 1,000 words, right?
Absolutely.
So with these constructs allow for us to intuitively really understand them, because we're not prejudiced in when we look at these things like we would if we saw something that was something that had been written, or something that we already were predisposed towards a view about.
Right, we had a judgment of
Yes.
it, and then we bring in the ego, and when you look at a shape, there is something very different about that. It activates a different part of us. And I know we were talking earlier about the Fibonacci sequence,
Yes.
so can you speak into that a little bit for me?
Yes. So this one it just gives a window into the complexity with which the entire body is organized. So life organizes, or that nature has built within it, organizational relationships that are geometric, that create everything that we experience and everything that we identify in our reality. So the Fibonacci sequence is one of the examples of this. So the Fibonacci sequence, for people who don't know, is basically, this was created by a 12th century mathematician, Italian, and it is on the principle of adding into something where you get this sacred ratio, or called the golden ratio. So it starts out with 0 plus 1 equals 1, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 2 plus 1 equals 3, and then it goes on to 5 and 8 and 20, and it goes on and on. And that sacred number, that kind of sacred pattern, if you would, can be seen in nature. It can be seen in flowers. Count the flowers, petals. You'll see like 3 or 5 or 8 or 21 or some increased variation of that. And if you take the number, the larger number, and divide it by the smaller number, especially as the sequence increases, it starts leveling into this predictable pattern of 1.6 something something something. I forget the details, but it just is like, and it's also called phi, P-H-I. So this repeating pattern, this kind of sequencing, if you would, then creates, it can be seen in everything, and also relationally. So one of the examples we talked about is how if I look at my arm, the relationship between my shoulder to my fingertip is like 1.6. And then the relationship between this is 1. So 1 to 1.6.
And that's the ratio.
That is the ratio.
Right.
The golden ratio is that ratio of the 1.6. And so I can take that a step further. So if I go from here to here is 1.6, then this is 1. If I go smaller from here to here, 1.6, and then this becomes 1. These patterns exist throughout the body and throughout everything, even in like simple, an iconographic thing like a crucifix, it's 1 to 1.6. We look at these symbols, this concept basically then forms a spiral. If we were to look at a 1 to 1.6 ratio rectangle, and you put a square in that, and then you're going to have a series of other squares that fit within that, and then that kind of spirals into a basic shape. That shape is found in everything.
And that is representative of, I believe, everything in your body, really.
Yes.
There's this consistent ratio in your body, in nature, in the galaxy.
Yes.
And so, that just by nature of that, I would say that defines sacred.
Yes, yeah, because there's some greater hand, because I'm not making that happen. So there's something magical in a way about that.
Right, and that's the DNA. People say, oh, that's the DNA. The DNA instructs, how a being or a plant or an animal is going to grow. But then, what's instructing the DNA?
Yes, yes. And what is instructing the whole solar system?
Right.
Yes.
Which brings me to my next question. Was what does viewing sacred geometry really do for us? What is, because just a little story, I consider trees to be sacred geometrical shapes. Absolutely. Certainly
absolutely.
the leaves, and that has the, the whole Fibonacci sequence applies there, certainly. But in the shape of the leaves and the way the trees grow, the fractals of the branches. But I was just out mowing my lawn a little while ago, and it hit me all of a sudden how pleasant it is to look at the trees in my backyard. And it just, I mean, it was like almost a satora, is that the way you say the word? It filled me.
Yes.
With this, like an awe. I was moved there was something about it, and I was thinking, gosh, that kind of ties into this question, I thought.
Absolutely. So nature restores us in so many ways, but it's an idea that works, right? So we have these beautiful systems out there that just work, that have connected to them a visual. We have hearing, auditory. We have olfactory. We have scent. So we have these different ways in which we are being influenced. But one of them is just the pure visual of it. So there's a kind of way of calming consciousness by being in a state of serenity through a space that has organized itself in a way that is inherently serene. So when you're going out, Ruth, you're going out to see, nature, etc. You're in a serene space that's organized in a serene way, and its impact is its own serenity. So when we're in a state of that kind of serenity, we can then heal. Because when we're in a relaxed, calm, relaxed state, and this is true in the medical arts, they're very aware of this, how anxiety itself creates a lot of problems. But when we're in a serene state, it reduces anxiety, and it gets us into a state of awareness. And that awareness gives us a kind of liberation from our stuckness, from our blockedness.
Yeah, there's something about that, and when you view shapes, like I have in the studio here, we're looking at the flower of life and Metatron's cube are in front of us here while we're speaking and doing this interview, and there's something very affirming about these shapes, and it's so mysterious. That's what I mean. The sacred geometry is sort of shrouded in mystery. What is it about this? But that's part of the allure of it, I think, is the magical nature of it, and how we're not, there's mystery to it, and it's not quite 100%. We don't quite know exactly why it affects us the way it does.
Yes, and I think one of the things about it is that since it's not built within a system, that we have developed prejudices over, like something that's been written. First of all, we're seeing it from a perspective of, the kind of curiosity. But also, I don't think we're just seeing it in the sense of just through our eyes. I do believe that we see this through the third eye. We experience it. Kind of like even when you're in nature, we're not so much just seeing it, but we're experiencing it.
Because we're more than this, and there's a whole other, our energy body is interacting with the whole experience, right?
Absolutely.
Right, beautiful. So another question that comes to mind is, other than an interesting metaphysical concept, how is sacred geometry relevant to us in our lives? How can we, it's like it's sort of woo-woo and airy-fairy, and
yes.
How can we bring it down to a more mainstream idea and make it an important piece of how we operate in everyday life?
So sacred geometry, its relevance can be seen in meditation. So one of the very first ways in which people use it for meditation is in northern India. This is through the mandalas. And the mandalas that's a Sanskrit for the word circle. And really what they were kinds of cleansings. You may have had a busy day or maybe really caught up in something, and it's just like looking at like a stream or looking at the sky. You're looking at this shape, and the shape itself has its own calming influence. You can do the shape as a meditation. You can create it with some kind of sand painting, like the Tibetan monks would do. You could walk within it, which is done in major churches, where you kind of follow in these basic shapes as a form of meditation. So this meditative state brings it into a kind of calming influence. And then that relevance then brings that, because it's positively influencing a person in a way of reducing their anxiety, opening up consciousness, creating possibilities, being more in a state of flow or allowing, and the outcomes then have become quite nice.
One of the things that I'm really fascinated with is the relationship of sacred geometry to sound, and specifically to the voice, because if anybody's familiar with the Cymatics, I'm going to put a little video for you so you can see what I'm talking about. It basically, that sound is produced in these, as we were saying before, these beautiful holographic bubbles, and that they've been able to record what sound does to like a drop of water, and it's an instrument called a cymoscope. And basically what they've had people sing into it, they play music into it, they play star sounds into this drop of water, and what happens, what comes up are these incredibly beautiful complex geometric shapes that are alive and moving and developing, and the human voice is the most beautiful of all, I think.
Yes, I mean, it's so interesting. We've also talked about how there is within each of the symbols of interpretation of the body. And what I mean by that is, if we look at, there's a system called phrenology, which is the shape of the head and what it means, the iridology, the eye. We can look at palmistry and its meanings. We can look at the foot, we can look at the tongue. But all of the body is always saying exactly the same thing, but in a different way. And with the way that we're interpreting sound, one of the things, and we talked about this, is how you can really get to the health of a person. What is it that's going on with them? What is it that's happening with them? And I do believe over time that there will be a baseline that will be established tonally. And then what we can do is we can look at that tonally in such a way to say, okay, this is what's coming up in the result. Let's see, we can see what those things happen to mean, and eventually it will become more diagnostic.
Absolutely. In fact, that's already here. Shari Edwards' work is in Bioacoustics is a testament to that. But I actually had a session with one of her practitioners. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And what you do, you go in, she has you speak into a microphone that's connected to a computer program, and the program produces a graph. And the graph, the highs and lows of the graph are called frequency-based biomarkers, and those are indications of where you are out of balance with the subtle vibrations of your body. Mm. And what was fascinating and very affirming for me was that I had had blood work done maybe a couple months before, yes. And the results of my voice print matched my blood work.
It's incredible.
And then they treat you with tone.
Mm-hmm. And so much less intrusive.
But then the side effects on pharmaceuticals, right? Yeah,
yes,
for
yes.
sure.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yes. I know that has its place too, for sure. But yeah, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
What I love is that our bodies are such a reflection of where we are and what it is that we're experiencing through our consciousness. And the connectedness between these is just absolute. So if I have something that's going on, and physically something's going on, well, there's certainly something that is happening in my consciousness that is needing to be addressed. And the body doesn't lie in that sense, in that it is always honest about whatever kind of discrepancy or problem is existing within my own thinking. And I can either listen to it and address it. So with to tickle the feather is all I need, or I can postpone that by not doing it and then have something bigger happen. Yes,
absolutely. Yes, it's fascinating work, and about the cymatics. What's fascinating with that is that when each tone, each frequency has a specific sacred geometrical shape, and that's across the board. That's, the tone of a star, the tone of a person's voice, the tone of a tuba, whatever. It's consistent across the board. So that, to me, that ties in with what we were saying earlier about how, why is sacred geometry referred to as sacred? There is it's something that I think connects us all. It connects us to the earth, it connects us to the cosmos, it connects everything.
Yes. It is a kind of, it is sort of a unifying pattern that is found within everything and anything that I can think of.
Absolutely, and that I think is a great place to end this interview. And very pleased to have had you here today, Lee. I was so excited that I had that idea, and so glad that you accepted.
Oh, my pleasure.
Wonderful,
Enjoyed it.
really speaking with you. Thank
Great.
you.